I'm just so honored and thrilled to be able to have Linda here on the line with us. It is amazing just to be in your presence. I'm just very quickly, I'll just tell everyone how I was able to meet Linda. I was teaching in Ramallah in summer of 2018, and Linda was doing a talk. She came to speak to the school, and let me just tell you, like, Linda steps to this basketball court, and it was just so New York, so New York, the energy, and I was like, yes, yes, I'm feeling the New York vibes out here in Ramallah. But then, of course, once you hear Linda speak, and just the energy she has, the optimism, just how inspiring and invigorating she is, it's something that it just comes out of you every single time you speak, and it elicits so much positivity of people who listen to you. So I'm so honored to have you here with us, Linda. It's really great to see you virtually.
I'm honored to be here with you, Andom. And I think it's important that you tell the story about where I met you. Like, just to be clear, let me reiterate that just in case folks didn't actually quite catch what Andom was saying. Here's a young man, Ethiopian American,
Eritrean, just so
Eritrean, sorry,
that's all good.
Eritrean American who literally is in Ramallah, in Palestine, in the West Bank, investing in teaching young Palestinian children from across the West Bank. That's exactly where he was. That's where he was spending his summer. He wasn't hanging out. He wasn't just, doing any other ordinary job as anybody else would be doing. He was literally somewhere where young people needed him, his energy. I mean, the kids were loving him over there, and I saw the joy that they had being around him, and I was just so proud when he came to talk to me, and he was like, yeah, I'm from New York too. I was like, that's what I'm talking about. And it just made me so proud to see another New Yorker and someone who's not Palestinian who was there in Palestine spending his summer.
Yeah, no, definitely. So that was an amazing summer. It's like weird for me to think of it as being something that was amazing because of the space that we were in, and where I was just very much filled with so much love from the students. The way in which they held memory and held grief, but were still at the same time so optimistic and hopeful for the future. Not filled in any way with like just sort of like negativity and hate. Like everything was just about justice and liberation, and just the most optimistic sort of love that I got from those young people. And still though, it's like difficult sometimes to think about me having a good time that summer because again of the space that I was in, with just like the occupation. And like, what is it like when you go back to Palestine? What are the feelings you get just being able to navigate between New York and over there?
I am so grateful to have grown up in a family. I'm a daughter of Palestinian immigrants who actually used to send me to Palestine almost every summer growing up. So I was able to pick up a very colloquial Palestinian dialect. I feel very connected when I go to Palestine. The minute I enter Palestine, there's like some beautiful calming feeling that comes to my heart. It really does feel like a homeland. The people, as you met Andom, like the people are the most hospitable I've ever seen. And not just because I'm Palestinian, but they will give you the shirt off their back. I mean, they will give you the very little that they have. And I just love it. I love it there. Like, it brings tears to my eyes to think about it and to think about the beautiful people, the food, the culture. You probably experienced the nightly, wedding parties on the streets. People selling the corn and just it's just beautiful. The kids running around, and as much as we talk about Palestine, particularly the West Bank being under a military occupation, but somehow the resilience of the Palestinian people still finding moments of joy, still finding moments to dance and to have babies and to have weddings like 5 times a day while I was there in the summer. And people just, eating and sitting at coffee shops and just really trying to live there, trying to find normalcy in something that is not normal. Like, it is not normal for people to live under any military occupation in any part of the world. And for some reason, somehow, the steadfastness of the Palestinian people of being able to continue life has been absolutely inspirational. And you feel it the minute you get there.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. Like, what if you had to just explain to people who have never been there, why? How do you think people over there process the fact that this is considered something normal here in the States and in other parts of the world? The way in which that this just oppression has been normalized for so long.
Hmm. I think that's the hardest part about it. I think there's so much unfortunate mischaracterizations of the Palestinian people and also what they want. And what the Palestinian people want, you were there, you've got to have the conversations. We had even this conversation with the young people who were at that school. People want to be free. People want to go to school. These kids have aspirations. Some of them wanted to go to school and college in America. Some of them wanted to go to Europe. I mean, they want the same things that any of us wanted growing up in New York City. These are people who want to coexist. And what they want is to be treated with dignity and respect. They want the opportunity to have influence over their government, just like we want here. They want to have their voices heard. Oftentimes, there are people talking about the Palestinians without the Palestinians. People are making decisions over their lives, and they just want to be able to make decisions over their own lives. And I think that's fair. And I think that that is something that everybody deserves around the world. And the Palestinian people are kind people. They're compassionate people. They're hospitable people. They are not people who want war. They don't want to see violence. If they had everything that they needed, that really is how you solve the conflict. You end the long-standing military occupation of the Palestinian people. You end the siege and blockade on Gaza right now, and especially now and during this pandemic. I mean, it just goes to show that there are people's livelihood and well-being that is in the hands of governments that get to decide whether or not people like in Palestine deserve to have access to testing or access to the type of treatment and ventilators and the type of resources that are going to be needed for them to be able to address this pandemic. So the Palestinian people want peace, and one of the things I always say to people, and we've learned this from the ancestors and those that have came before us, you cannot have peace without justice. And so for people to keep calling on the Palestinians like peace, peace, everything peace, I'm with it. I'm all about peace. But how are you going to get people to the table to talk about peace if they don't have the basic rights, basic justice? And I think the Palestinian people are calling for justice and have been for many years, and including all of us and the people in the diaspora and the solidarity movements across the country who have stood with the Palestinian people in their pursuit of dignity and self-determination.
Yeah, 100%. I want to come back to sort of contemporary politics in Palestine and thinking around coronavirus and how how the occupation affects the ability to actually deal with the pandemic. But I want to go back for a second and think about your amazing book, which is now out, and it covers a lot. What was the impetus? Yeah, right. Yeah, put that out there. Actually, I'm going to put the link on in a second. What was sort of the impetus for this book and for writing this book, and what was that sort of process for you in going for it?
I mean, for me, this book really, Andom, is a love letter to the communities that I came from. It is something that I believe that I owed them. Oftentimes, for the many years that I've been organizing, almost 2 decades now, people have tried to define Muslims and Muslim Americans, Arab Americans, which I hold many of those identities, Palestinian Americans, and really have kind of given us a frame to work in. They gave us like this box and they said, in order for you to be palpable, in order for you to be accepted, you have to fit somehow into this box. And this book is basically saying, I make the box. Our community makes the box. We get to show up in all of us, just like we deserve to be all of us. We deserve to practice our religion freely in this country. We deserve the rights that we're fighting for. We're not asking, when people, and also to be able to define things that oftentimes have been called controversial or things that are contentious. Like, for example, someone asks me where I'm from, and the minute I say Palestinian, people are like, oh, I don't want to talk about politics. Why can't I just be a human being? Why can't it just mean that you asked me where I was from and I told you what my parents are Palestinian, or I'm a daughter of Palestinian immigrants? Somehow my identity as a Palestinian, as a Muslim American, has been politicized. And my book is saying we deserve dignity. We are not asking anyone for any favors. And we are not only are we a community not asking for any favors and that deserves dignity and respect, we're going to fight for it because we know what this country has done to many communities before. And it is not exclusive, the experiences of Muslim Americans in this country. We have a long, unfortunate history of discrimination, of bigotry, of xenophobia. And this book is basically also not a book about victimization. I don't appreciate people who continue that kind of victim mentality. This book is about saying we are survivors of racial intolerance in this country and racial violence. We are survivors of the many policies that this government has imposed on us, both under Democratic and Republican, administrations. Like, one of the things that I appreciate about you, Andom, is that, for me, I'm not like an anti-GOP person. I'm not the one that's like the Republicans are the only bad people out there. They're the only ones that don't care about our communities. We've experienced that at the hands of the Democrats also. And so for me, I talk about that in my book. Mayor, we've had different mayoral administrations in New York City. Like, it doesn't matter. I mean, when a community scapegoated, they're scapegoated. So this book is just basically tells you my journey and stories as a New York organizer, as a mom, as a Palestinian, and really gives you the decision at the end of mostly every chapter by saying to you, are you going to be a bystander? Are you here to be a bystander? Are you going to be a bystander when you hear a young Black man was killed at the hands of the New York Police Department? Are you going to be a bystander when there is a hurricane that happens that directly impacts some of the poorest people in our society? Are you just going to sit back and be like, well, they're going to have to just figure it out?
Yeah.
Are you going to be a bystander when they're undocumented people are being picked up from our communities? Are we just going to sit around and say, well, this is what this country does? Like, I'm just going to put my hands up. Like, this book is basically taking you on a journey where every time I have been faced with injustice, whether it's against me or people in my community or my neighbors, I have made the decision to never be a bystander. And I think that also comes with politics. If you're going to Congress, I don't care about you sitting in a nice seat in Congress. I need you to tell me I'm going to Congress because I'm not going to be a bystander. I'm going to be a voice at the table that hasn't really been there before. And I'm so grateful to the young people of color and the women of color that we have put in Congress in the recent years, who have actually not been bystanders. Like, they went in there being like, call me controversial, call me provocative to who? Controversial to who? Compared to who? You know what I mean? And they are just basically shattering all the framing that has been offered to us. And that really is what my book is about.
No, and it's beautiful. And I think, just the title itself and the idea of being a bystander and sort of the elimination and the obviation of solidarity, and the fact that corporate interests, identity politics, a lot of times prevents us from actually seeing the similarities that we have with each other, and that we all actually are in a shared struggle to, for dignity, to improve our lives in different ways. I think a lot of times Palestine sometimes is a litmus test around a lot of issues, because you can see if someone is actually willing to stand up for Palestinian justice, what really where they are when it comes to other issues. But I also think it used to be the same way around like gay marriage, for example. And there used to be so many ways in which politicians and different special interests would try to divide people around gay marriage. And now, obviously, we've seen it a great shift in a more progressive direction over the last 20 years. But I remember when I was like first starting teaching, it was very difficult to have conversations with young people around sort of more inclusive LGBTQ issues and curricula and whatnot. One of the proudest moments I have teaching was using the framework of Blackness and solidarity, and then sort of moving forward in a civil rights direction from a Black perspective, using that for some of my students to be able to say, like, wait a second, like, why actually do I have a lot of these sort of heteronormative and patriarchal ideas about identity? And so actually one of my students, we did this whole lesson on Bully, the movie Bully, and there was a kid that was being bullied outside his neighborhood. Like 5 kids were picking on him, using homophobic languages and that. And my student actually stood up, came in there, it's like, no, we're going to be upstanders. We're not going to be bystanders. I'll never forget, like, he came in the next day so proud that he was doing it. So I just love the title, and I love, that we're not going to be just standing aside as there's so much injustice happening around us. So I think that's an amazing title. A lot of people, Linda, they know you from the Women's March, and they know you for a lot of things, especially post-Women's March. But you've been doing this for such a long time. What was sort of the first moment that really was, I don't want to necessarily say a radicalizing moment, but a moment of awakening and awareness for you about what was going on, not only in this country, but around the world?
Oh, you could definitely say my radicalizing moment, because that's what I call it. And I think, just to be clear, as Angela Davis has taught us, and as the dictionary says, I mean, the term radical is something we need to reclaim. I mean, to be radical is to get to the root of the problem. And that's what the goal always is of every organizer, of every community looking to uproot oppression, is you got to get to the root of the problem in order to address it. My radicalizing moment came, some came at there's multiple radicalizing moments for me. My first one I shared in my book was going to visit my uncle in 1987 when I went to Palestine, and my mom actually taking me on a very long journey to visit my uncle in a Israeli prison. And my uncle was picked up with over 24 men, never charged with any crime. There was never a trial. They never saw a judge. They just literally got detained. And my uncle was in prison for like 2.5 years, 3 weeks after he just had gotten married. And as a young kid in 1987, I was only 7 years old. And it was my first time learning about who I am as a Palestinian, my lineage, the kind of struggle and the kind of blood that I carried in my veins, asking my mother, like, what did my uncle do? For us in America, we had learned as a kid, if you're in jail, you must have done something wrong. You must be some sort of criminal. And to realize that my own uncle was not any of those things, and neither were most of the men that he was detained with. And that was my first radicalizing moment to hold, at least from the perspective of being Palestinian and understanding that kind of that resilient people that I was kind of carrying with me. And my big second radicalizing moment was after the immediate the horrific attacks of 9/11. We're New Yorkers. It happened in New York. I live in one of the largest Muslim American communities in the state of New York. And immediately after the horrific attack that killed thousands of our fellow Americans, we were all like, oh my God, like mourning and confused and scared. And I was 21 years old at the time, and we were really in solidarity with all of our fellow New Yorkers. But all of a sudden, immediately after the attacks, we weren't just New Yorkers anymore. All of a sudden, our all the Muslims, your neighbors, your friends, they became like part of a suspect community. Like, people started looking at us like somehow all these Muslims must be attached or affiliated with this horrific attack on our country. And so what I was able to witness, unfortunately, in the immediate aftermath of 9/11 are things that I did not imagine were going to happen to my community. I mean, I've watched raids on buildings where they would like call the men outside to the street and ask them to lay down. I watched the little kids through the windows, like watching their fathers outside. I saw raids on coffee shops, and we have a lot of those in our community here in the Southwest Brooklyn area. I saw just men being detained, women coming to the mosques crying, saying, "We don't know. We haven't heard from our husbands in the last 5 days. We don't know where they went." And all of a sudden, men in our community were disappearing into the abyss. And for folks who are interested in learning more about this, I mean, if you put little Pakistan detentions post 9/11 in Google, you'll read a lot of articles like communities were destroyed, families were separated. And so for me as a young person, I was an aspiring high school English teacher, and I talk about that in my book. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to go back to my old high school, teach young people of color, like, I wanted to love them and embrace them and encourage them and allow them to use literature to express themselves. And then I ended up being a translator as someone who was fluent in the Arabic language, and became a translator for women in my community looking for their loved ones in the abyss of law enforcement. And I never left. And that was for me, like, it was that I had that moment. It was like at the mosque when I saw one woman crying, even though I had experienced a couple of things before that, but something just clicked in my mind. And I was like, wait a minute. I was like, these are my people. This is not okay. Like, I'm not going to just sit around and just be like, this is just how it's going to be. This is not okay. These people have nothing to do with this horrific attack. There is no reason our government should be targeting them. And what made me really sad is a lot of these people are immigrants, and they came to this country because somebody promised them this was the land of freedom. Somebody promised them that they were going to come to a country that was going to embrace them and allow them to live freely and safely. And as you know, many people who come from Muslim countries, they came from police states. They came from dictatorships and living under these regimes. And all of a sudden they come to America believing in this vision that someone shared with them. And it turns out that it's not exactly what they were offered. And so that was another radicalizing moment for me. And as you know, unfortunately, there have been many in the last 20 years, but that was like the impetus that made this like my full-time job. Like, this is what I do every day, and I have been doing for almost the last 19 years.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's, I was a junior junior in high school when 9/11 happened. And, for me, like, as a young person, elementary school, just, learning about slavery and the Holocaust, and, myself personally, like, Eritrea only became independent in 1993. So there were all these like big sort of political things that I was trying to process as a young person. Then in high school, like Intifada 2000, end of 2000, 2001, 9/11 attacks, 2003, war in Iraq. There's just like so many things happening where you're like, what is going on, And then seeing how, United States government is dealing with this, obviously, post 9/11 has been extremely disconcerting, to put it lightly. But folks, I'm just giving you a preview a little bit of the book, because I think that's like chapter 4 or 5. So definitely pick it up. Again, we are not bystanders. What was the most fun part of actually writing the book and going through this process?
I think I don't know about fun.
Yeah.
Fun's the right word. But I think what I enjoyed about writing this book is really going back. I mean, I had a woman who was very supporting me throughout writing this book. A woman who's kind of like not a ghostwriter, but a collaborator to kind of help me put my thoughts in a way that kind of weave together in the chapters. And she basically sat me down and said, I need you to think of 12, 13, 14 moments in your life. And usually people think of the most, cliche moments. Like if you're a mom, you want to think about that first, your first child being born, or you think about your college graduation, or you think about the day that your parents immigrated to this country. And she really took me into a deeper place. And I think all of us, if we sat down and thought about the 12 most profound moments in our lives, oftentimes they may be just the conversation that you had with someone that moved you, right? It could have been an experience that you had or someone that you met that actually changed your life or transformed you in a way. It could have been a tragedy that happened, maybe to not necessarily to you, but to somebody else. I mean, one for me, one of those profound moments for me was the murder of Michael Brown in Ferguson. I mean, it's not that he was the first young black man to ever be killed by law enforcement. But there was something about his story that I really connected me to Palestine, that it was like my whole world connected, right? Not only was he a young, unarmed black man killed at the hands of the Ferguson Police Department, he was left to lay out in the street for 4 hours in the hot sun, literally soaked in his blood, like his whole humanity stripped from him. And it really connected me to the young people of Gaza, if you remember, who were sharing with the young people of Ferguson through Twitter on how to protect themselves from the tear gas that was being thrown at them from the United States government. And there was this kind of beautiful natural solidarity that happened between the young Palestinians in Gaza and the young black kids of Ferguson. And it was something that transformed me. And even the way I think about solidarity and what it means for me when two marginalized communities come together in a moment of love, of radical love, of solidarity. And so that was another radicalizing moment for me, but also a profound moment of my life of going to visit Ferguson, of seeing and talking to young people. They were so, when I went to Ferguson, because of the whole interaction or online interaction that the young people of Ferguson had with the Palestinians, they were so curious, and it was the most beautiful thing. They were like, they were like, where is Palestine? Tell me more about Palestine. What is happening in Gaza? What and be, how do they know those things, and tell us more. And I was able to really share and get into conversations, and it was one of the most beautiful moments of my life to share the struggle of one people with the struggle of another people right here in the United States of America.
No, that's so well put. Not only is that solidarity important and beautiful, but when you think about it in the context of just how, the way in which power and hegemony is actually manifested across the world, and how there's actually intersections between them, it makes that solidarity even more necessary. Because like when we think about policing and we think about the way that, like the NYPD and US police forces throughout the country, they engage with the IDF and the deadly exchange, and the fact that, the US military was giving military grade weaponry to Ferguson. Like we see how the military industrial complex and the intersection it has with oppressive forces throughout the world, they're all in solidarity already. So we need to be even more in solidarity in order to actually be able to be a front and a challenge against that power. So I think Ferguson is such a great example of that. So let's go back to Palestine a little bit more explicitly. And like, so in the race that I'm in running right now, District 16, Southern Westchester and the North Bronx, Representative Elliot Engel has been in office here for the last 30 years. And in general, he's a pretty uncritical, reflexive supporter of Israel. So again, that's another sort of a mild way to put it. He has said that conditioning military aid to Israel is one of the stupidest things ever. And it's to me, it's obviously a very wild statement. But like, what do you just think in general? Not even speaking about Elliot Engel specifically, in general, politicians' sort of weariness of being able to actually speak the truth about Palestine.
One of the things, and this is why I feel like I'm still around, because I just have this like optimism, and I see so much progress in the work of this Palestinian solidarity movement, and the amount of education and information that has come out over the years, particularly because of social media, that the Palestinians have been able to share their narrative and share videos and share photos and their experiences in ways they were not able to do. And you know this from mainstream media, it's rare that you see Palestinian voices centered in the media. Anytime that there's some sort of policy on Palestine, there'll be like a whole panel of white men on CNN trying to talk to you about what the Palestinians want or don't want, or why they're an obstacle to peace. And over the years, with the idea of social media, we've been able to share our voices on a much higher level. We've been able to build deeper relationships in the Palestinian, amongst the progressive movement as a whole, and have seen more people understand our kind of connection to that issue. And I think the issue that we found is that people ordinarily don't see, okay, what does Palestine got to do with me? Why should I care about this issue? The thing about Congress is it's a Democratic Republican problem. I mean, the Democrats and Republicans will be divided on every other issue, but when it comes to the issue of Israel Palestine, there's pretty much unison, or has been for the many decades, in unequivocal support for the state of Israel. And so my thing is like, look, am I expecting members of Congress to wave Palestinian flags and say free Palestine? That's not what I'm looking for. What I'm looking for is some sort of even-handed approach, and one that holds the state of Israel accountable to the human rights violations it commits against the Palestinian people. And in fact, this government, our government, President Obama and others have oftentimes invoked some of those types of violations against the Palestinian people. And so, I'm not surprised that somebody like Engel, is uncritical of the state of Israel, but it's also not acceptable. And it's not acceptable for any member of Congress to not hold any country, and listen, a lot of people will say this to us, Andom. They'll say, why are you so obsessed with the state of Israel? Like Saudi Arabia, violates human rights. North Korea violates human rights. And it's such a ludicrous, like, when people say that, it's such a ludicrous thing to say. It's like, of course, Saudi Arabia like violates human rights, and it's absolutely outrageous. Of course, the government of Iran forces women to wear hijab, and there's, oppressive policies there. Look at the Uyghur Muslims who are being literally in concentration camps in China. There's countries all over the world who are violating human rights. Why the state of Israel? Well, first of all, I'm Palestinian. So you would think that I would want to be obsessed with the country that is oppressing my people directly. But the second thing is I'm an American. And when I think about when I think about schools being closed down in the south side of Chicago, when I think about Brooklyn, where I live, and now we have this pandemic, and I think about the closing of Victory Memorial Hospital, I think about the closings of Litch Hospital, and we were literally all over the country closing hospitals, left and right. And all of a sudden now we have a pandemic, and we're like short on hospitals, short on beds, short on ventilators, short on everything. And my taxpayer dollars, our American taxpayer dollars, are funding the continued occupation of the Palestinian people. Like North Korea commits outrageous human rights violations against the North Korean people. But guess what? We're not funding them. We're not bottom lining that oppression. And so the reason why we focus on the state of Israel is because Israel and Egypt, the Egyptian government and Israel, literally take up 75% of all military aid from the United States of America. So while we are over here talking about we need healthcare, and everyone keeps saying, how are you going to pay for that, Linda? You're out here running around the streets talking about Medicare for all, cancellation of student debt, and these pie in the sky, we can't do this and everything. You all want these things. Okay, fine. So why don't you decrease the military aid to the state of Israel? And if you want to do Egypt too, I'm cool with that. And with the understanding that we have to put conditions on the nations who are using our taxpayer dollars. This blank checks that we're giving to everybody while we're giving $1,200 to people during this pandemic. Like, I'm still outraged that anybody in government thought that $1,200 was enough for people who are paying, like New York City, we're paying average of 2-bedroom apartments, $2,500. I'm not the one that made those. And then let's say you do pay $1,200 in rent in New York City for like a studio apartment. What about your food? What about your cell phone bill? What about your electric bill? What about your gas bill? What about your other basic necessities of life? So my thing is, people right now, we have the Rashidas of the world, the Ilhans of the world, we have the AOCs of the world who are going in and they're disrupting a long-standing Democratic, Republican, unequivocal policy position on Israel. And for me, I think that we should all be in agreement that any country that takes our money, and I'm talking about ours as in my money and your money, Andoms, and the American people's money, we deserve to hold those people accountable to some conditions. And the basic minimum is, for God's sakes, don't violate human rights. And that may include us as the United States of America calling on Israel to end the military occupation of the Palestinian people and end the siege and blockade on Gaza.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and those are actually, pretty integral parts of, our campaign platform, ending military aid, not only to Israel and Egypt, as you mentioned, but also Saudi Arabia, UAE, the Philippines, until that there are actually, conditions on the behavior that they have with respect to their citizens. And then when we think about that in, conjunction with the how do we pay for it argument for so much of the social disinvestment that we have in our own society, it's just obviously clear the hypocrisy about, the questions about how we pay for it are never actually asked when it comes to, oh, how are we going to pay for these countries that are not even our own country to oppress other people? The money somehow always appears. But when it comes to actually funding ourselves here in this country to end systemic oppression, institutionalized racism, systems that have been entrenched for centuries, like, oh, well, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. So it's a very, very, again, that's why, honestly, Linda, like when you see someone of your, just like, again, energy, your, vivaciousness, and just how much like light you bring, it's really, really empowering, because so much of this stuff can actually, it's depressing. It makes you want to have pessimism. It doesn't lead you to believe that there's actually hope for the future. And so, like, when you speak about things like racial justice, liberation, putting all of these things together, speaking about, like Black Lives Matter as a Palestinian and being like, yeah, all of these things are obviously connected. It's amazing because so much of American society makes us think that we're isolated. So much of capitalism makes us think that we're alone and anonymous and fighting this just on our own. But, with people like you and, the fact that we're not bystanders, we know that, we're all in this together for sure.
And it's also about not taking no for an answer. And that's
Yeah,
really what organizing and the type of organizing, like, if someone tells me how we're going to pay, we don't have no money, you're going to find money. Just like we've seen during this pandemic, you finally found $1,200 somewhere, right, to give to the American people, which of course was not enough. You found $250 billion to give and support small businesses around the country. You found $150 billion to give to hospitals across the country. So we know that the money is there. We know what this government is capable of. So they're never going to be able to tell me ever again, we don't got money for that. And really what it is about, getting more people engaged. And what I'm worried about, Andom, and that's why I'm really encouraging people to support inspiring local candidates that are going to help them take their passion and energy. As you know, I mean, I was a Bernie Sanders supporter. And the reason why I was a Bernie Sanders supporter was because I didn't want the narrative of let's just defeat Trump doesn't work for me. And it doesn't work for a lot of people. Like, people don't vote against things. People vote their aspirations. People vote their convictions. They vote their principles. And so if you keep telling me don't vote for this because this is bad, is not how you move voters. So when people said, what's life look like after, a Bernie Sanders, candidacy, after he suspended his campaign. And what I've been telling people is, listen, I still have passion. I'm still passionate about the issues. So I'm going to go support local candidates, young people of color, immigrants, progressives across the country. And when we do that and take our energy, for those of you who supported Elizabeth Warren or supported Senator Bernie Sanders, take that same energy, put it on local candidates. And you know what? That's how you increase voter turnout. And then by default, we can defeat this fascist demagogue in the White House. But we got to go back to understanding all politics is local. Because what they've done to us is they've come inside of our minds to believe that every 4 years we wake up and somebody hands us two candidates. One is bad and one is outrageous. And they tell us, well, of course you don't want the outrageous one, so just vote for the bad candidate. And my thing is, like, that's not how I work. I want to vote for someone inspirational, someone who is full of conviction, and someone who I know is going to win there and fight for the people. And that's why I always say to people, all politics is local. And that's how we're going to kind of move forward in this election and continue to decrease the type of apathy that we have. To your point, it's kind of like, this, going to communities, people say, what do you think is going to change? And look at me, I've been living in the housing projects for the last 40 years and I still get paid minimum wage and nothing changed for me. And I'm not going to lie to you, it's hard to argue with people who have had the same circumstances, some for decades and some from generation to generation. And we have to get up to a point to explain to people that, listen, you are worthy of this. And you know what? We're going to ask for the line. And if we don't get the top of the line, we may get a little bit less than that. But to start at the bottom, which is where a lot of folks tell us to start in politics, is just not going to work for us anymore. So I hope that people understand that local politics is the way we're going to win this election, and supporting the people who represent our values is the way that we got to do this election. And I hope that's what people are doing. Support somebody local running in your community.
Agree 100%. So we have about 15 minutes. Let's take some questions. If you have a question, just drop it in the question sort of box right there on the bottom right side. So we got some already. Let's see right here. Can Joe Biden change his views on Palestine?
So I don't know about can he change his views, but can we force him to change his views? I think is the way that we're going to have to operate. I think that with the Donald Trump presidency, we're like working against a brick wall. And I think with Joe Biden, there's a fence there. And we're going to have to figure out how to jump over that fence. And that's going to require all of us organizing and committed to building a movement under a Biden presidency. I think we can probably move Biden on a lot more issues than we could. I don't know if Palestine is going to be the first one we're going to be able to move him towards. Some of the things that he's committed to so far is he said that he would restore funding to UNRWA, which of course is important. I mean, as you know, Donald Trump stripped humanitarian aid from the Palestinian people, and Biden has committed to reinstating that. So I'll give him some props for that. He still believes in the two-state solution, which most Democrats do, including even someone who's not a Democrat like Bernie Sanders. But again, I think that there's some potential there when it comes to Biden.
No, and I think exactly what you're talking about. It's the solidarity and the movement building that we're doing on the ground hopefully can be able to push not just Biden, but all candidates, because all candidates are not where they need to be on that issue. Okay, another question. What will the candidate, me, do to bring Palestine more into national attention? And I think, this is something that Linda was speaking a little bit about before, but I think the ways in which we're able to bring connections across issues is really important when it comes to not only building and developing our own solidarity, but exposing people who might have a quote-unquote brainwashed view about certain things because of just the way things have been normalized. So I think when we speak about, for example, the obvious brutality and atrocities that are happening at our own border and the caging of children there, you're not going to find many Democrats who support that. But when you're able to make that connection and be like, yes, that is something that is immoral, that is wrong. If it's immoral and wrong here, then obviously justice is not divisible. Well, it's immoral and wrong anywhere around the world. And so the caging of Palestinian children without due process is obviously, or the caging of any child, but especially without due process, is wrong anywhere. And I think that's one way that we can bring Palestine more into the national attention by making it have connections, because there's just so much, obviously, propaganda around the Palestinian situation. Okay, getting a couple more questions. What is Joe Biden's black agenda?
Listen, I don't even really understand his agenda just in general. I think that Biden has a lot of work to do to articulate his agenda for Black people, of course, and really for all of our communities. I think right now, a lot of the rhetoric around Joe Biden is he's a better option for us than Trump. And that's kind of what I was alluding to earlier, that people and voters are not moved by you being better than another candidate. You got to tell me why I should and how you're going to earn my vote. And I think that's going to be the dilemma for us in the upcoming election. I think Joe Biden has talked about increased funding for HBCUs. I think that there has been some conversations around, HBCU funding. There's been some funding around housing around the country. I saw a proposal. Of course, that's because there's going to be people around him who are kind of supporting him through that process. Joe Biden has a really bad track record when it comes to, as you know, the crime bill that he championed and wrote. Also on redlining, there's just a lot that he has to really go back from. And so I'm giving a little bit of benefit of the doubt just because I know that he's starting to get some folks around him. And as you know, Senator Bernie Sanders offered to them that they start some kind of working groups around some of the issues around healthcare, around criminal justice reform. We haven't yet seen who those people are. Who are going to be on those, or who of the Bernie kind of team, if folks is going to be on those working groups. So let's see where that goes. But for now, I think it's still out there. I still don't understand it myself.
Yeah, and I'll just jump in real quick around this. Universalistic programs that will disproportionately benefit people of color, and particularly Black people, are Medicare for All and student loan debt cancellation. And so if any candidate is not willing to go 100% on those issues, then the ways in which that they actually are going to talk about Black progress is going to be somewhat limited. I see someone here is also mentioning about reparations, and yeah, we need to be very specific about the particularistic programs that we have to deal with when it comes to specific groups around his institutionalized racism and just legacies of oppression. And so, any candidate who's not willing to do that, obviously, Biden and even Bernie was not great on that issue. They're going to be obviously missing the beat a little bit. I saw a question that came up real quick. Just Linda, who's your favorite rapper and why? So while I bring up the next question, if you want to answer that.
I mean, listen, it's definitely I would say equal. I'm from New York City, but I mean, obviously I'm going to say Biggie, but definitely Biggie and Tupac. Like I grew up on Biggie, Tupac, Method Man, Wu-Tang Clan. I could even say that I'm a little younger than this, but I could also say like Run DMC. So that's kind of like my genre of hip hop. This new hip hop, I don't know. Sometimes I don't be feeling it all.
So you're from Brooklyn though, like so between Nas and Jay-Z, who are you? Are you Jay-Z?
Jay-Z from a musical perspective, yeah. Sometimes, politically, I don't know. Just kidding. Yeah, I think I would say Jay-Z.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, I'm a Nas person myself. Okay, from a friend of mine, Vanessa, out in Sweden. Have you heard about the case of Siham Ali Abdu? And if so, are you willing to fight for her release?
No, I haven't heard that. If you don't mind, Vanessa, can you drop something in my DMs, please? I would love to learn more about that. She sounds like a Muslim sister.
Yeah. I'll just speak briefly about. Oh, is Fatima on here? Fatima, wrong answer. I don't know if Fatima's. Are you talking about Nas, Fatima? Bye, Fatima. Okay, so really quick, Siham Ali Abdu. Vanessa was actually on yesterday, and she was on as well 2 weeks ago. Many people may see that there are some Eritreans in the chat who have purple logos on for their icons. Siham Ali Abdu is an Eritrean American born in LA who's been imprisoned in Eritrea for the last 8 years. And she was imprisoned at the age of 15, I believe. And she's been held in incommunicado detention for the last 8 years. So I know Vanessa is an amazing organizer out in Sweden who has been doing a lot to not only free Siham Ali Abdu, but lots of other Eritrean prisoners of conscience. I know Vanessa is of the mindset that, if Siham weren't Black, female, and Muslim, that the United States government would be taking more attention to this
case. Outrageous.
Yeah. So I know that there are a lot of people on here who have been talking about that. So thank you for that question, Vanessa. And Vanessa, definitely drop a line in Linda's DMs, slide in her DMs, and talk about the case a little bit because it's definitely important.
There's a link to a story or something. I'd love that. I'd love to also change my profile to be in solidarity. This is crazy.
Yeah, it's wild. It's sometimes it's just like how it's happened for the last 8 years that the United States has not done anything about it.
We're an American, like the idea that if our country is not fighting for us, like who's supposed to go find us? You know what I mean? Like that's the whole point of your American passport. This idea that it actually says it in your American passport, like that this passport is supposed to protect you from other governments like apprehending you or treating or violating your human rights. Like literally, there's like language in your passport that says that.
Yeah, no, 100%. So yeah, everyone just like check out Vanessa's profile, Vanessa Sahaya, and One Day Siyum. The hashtag is purple for Siham. We have a question from Asini. What are some books you recommend to become more, quote, woke on everything home and abroad?
Oh man.
Buy Linda's book.
Well, definitely my book, of course. I didn't pay you to do that. Oh my God. Literally my son has been reading the autobiography of Assata Shakur. And while it is the autobiography of one woman, it really does give you a perspective into kind of the Black Liberation Army and some of the struggles of Black people during, actually this is more a little after the Civil Rights Movement. And I think it's a really important book to kind of understand some history. Anything by, of course, Angela Davis is really important. Ibram Zendi, Xendi, wrote a great book called Stamped. Oh my God. It's a big book. It's actually really thick, but I couldn't believe that I was able to read it. So important, so detailed, so informative, and really gets you into a mindset I don't know, it was a really empowering book for me and really informative. There's also a book that was written by a wonderful Palestinian American professor. Many of you know her, Noura Erakat,
She's
and
amazing. Yeah.
she wrote a book called Justice for Some, and really looks at Palestine for those of you interested to understand kind of how the legal system works and how kind of the conditions of the Palestinian people, is a great book. It just came out this couple of months ago, like later of last year. It's
Yep.
called Justice for Some. So I would love for you guys to read Noura, read Ibram Zendi, read Angela Davis. Obviously, I know C. Murphy's out there. I mean, of course, I'm expecting that you all have already read this book, but of course, if you haven't read the autobiography of Malcolm X during this quarantine, might be the right time to do it. One last thing, I found it on YouTube, so it's free to watch. You don't have to pay for it. But there's this really great documentary called King in the Wilderness. King in the Wilderness, which is about the last 18 months of Dr. Martin Luther King's life. And what I really appreciate about that documentary, it's not the usual, like, Dr. Martin Luther King was so amazing. It was about the struggles and mental health issues and all the kind of trauma that those in the civil rights movement were experiencing, including Dr. Martin Luther King, and also includes a great juxtaposition between the different approaches we have to movements. There's Dr. Martin Luther King, who's like nonviolence, and then you have help me out here.
Stokely Carmichael.
Stokely Carmichael is also in it, and it's so funny. They're walking like in a march together for the same reason, but there's a reporter in between them interviewing them both, and you're like, how is this possible? How could you both be in the same march together, but you're actually giving two different answers? And it's just a really stark, profound, moving documentary, and it's not really long, and I hope that you all get to watch it in this quarantine. Of course, someone else is bringing up another book that, I mean, listen, I could sit here for 20 years telling you about great books. Obviously, Michelle Alexander's The New Jim Crow, and just so folks know, she is in the process of writing another great book that's going to come out soon.
Yeah, so we definitely need a Linda book list. Are you on Goodreads or something? We need your whole list, Linda.
I think listen, I got some time on my hands. I might just go do that for all y'all.
Yes, definitely. Let's take, if anyone else has another question, just definitely put it into the Q&A thing on the bottom. I'm just going to read one last one here before we take another one in case someone puts it in. How can we convince working class Trump voters that policies like Medicare for all would help them?
I actually believe that we really did start doing that work in the Bernie Sanders campaign. If you remember, folks, back in 2016, Michigan, which has semi-open primaries, they actually gave Bernie Sanders the biggest political upset in history, where Bernie Sanders won the Michigan primary back in 2016. So that work is being done, and there's a lot of folks who, I think this pandemic has really exposed the need for Medicare for all. And I think even though this is such a horrific and tragic time, and a lot of our fellow, our neighbors and folks, living in our communities are unfortunately losing their life to this pandemic. But I also think that one of the blessings that came out of it is it exposed the systemic injustice that we've seen for so long, and many of us have been fighting for so long. So I think this pandemic is going to be a great way for us to frame for people that this pandemic did not discriminate against you based on race or based on your nationality or even your immigration status. It's our system that discriminates. And I think that there were a lot of people, and I've seen people on social media, even like the kinds of white voters that you're talking about, who are basically like, okay, fine, you're going to give me free tests, but after I spend 2 weeks in the hospital, you're going to send me a bill for $40,000. And I actually saw those kinds of posts on social media. And I think we also have to invest in some of those conversations in swing states, right? For me in New York City, like I also understand when Black people in particular say like I don't have the energy to invest in these conversations with people who don't believe in my humanity and don't believe in my right to thrive in this country. I think that there are people that we could really reach by sharing these universal principles. Like, I don't care if you're a Democrat or a Republican, like your kids need healthcare. You need healthcare. I don't care if you're a Democrat or a Republican. Your student debt should be canceled. Your medical debt should be canceled. And I think that type of language really opens up people. And unfortunately, we have a lot of closed primaries, right? So those types of messaging don't go speak to those folks because they're in closed primaries. So they couldn't vote for somebody like like a Bernie Sanders. Now we get into a general election, and guess what? To Andom's point, Joe Biden doesn't support Medicare for all, right? He believes that your healthcare is still connected to your employment, and I think once again this pandemic exposed that 22 million Americans are without jobs right now because of this pandemic. Guess what? Not only did they lose their job, they lost their health care. So I actually see some optimism that we can actually push for Medicare for all under the next administration, especially if it's a Joe Biden administration. You know why? Because all the surveys, all the statistics show that a majority of Americans support Medicare for all. And we just need the political will and the movement to push that forward. So I think that's possible.
I agree 100%. I think sometimes the issue around this is framing, because 100%, when you look at the polling, the vast majority of Americans support Medicare for all. But the problem is sometimes Democrats, they don't, one, know how to frame things, and two, they equivocate and just are willing to just completely give up their positions as soon as there becomes a little bit of a fight around it. And we actually need to bunker down and actually be even more firm about the things that we believe in, the values. Yeah.
Also, because some Democrats get money from the pharmaceutical industry.
Well, yeah.
Let's not forget that part.
Let's talk about that. Yeah, right. There are definitely some incentives when it comes to that. Okay. All right. This is the last question right here. Okay. If Jill Stein runs, should we vote for her instead? Often they say voting third party is useless.
Listen, I don't know. I might get some haters for this one, but like Jill Stein ain't my savior. Like Jill Stein she ain't it, folks. Like, it's not even a thing for me about third party. I am 100% in agreement that I am so tired of the two-party duopoly in this country. I think it's a failed structure for democracy, and I'm with you 100%. Do I believe that Jill Stein is the lady that's supposed to like represent the values of Black people and marginalized people in America? Do I believe that I align with her fully on every issue? I don't think so. I think what I want everyone to commit to is not to wake up every 4 years and tell me to vote for the Green Party. I want everyone to commit over the next 4 years that we start really hunkering down and actually, and if people do want a third party, let's build a third party. Let's build a third party that is led by Black people, that is led by LGBTQIA people, by Muslims, by former refugees, by people who are the most marginalized and have everything, everything at stake, and the most to lose, and let them be the leaders. And if there's a party like that in America, I'm with it. I'm ready to put my money on it. I'm ready to put my women power, my people power on it. I just don't think that this time around it is going to be strategic for folks to vote for Jill Stein. But I will just say this. If you are in a state like ours, Andom, like in New York, vote for whoever the hell you want to vote for. Because guess what? It don't actually matter in New York City on that level. Vote for the candidates who inspire you, the local candidates who inspire you. And if you really want to vote third party and you want to vote for the Green Party, then you do that. But I'm asking our friends that are in swing states, if you are in a swing state like Michigan, like Wisconsin, like Pennsylvania and Virginia and Florida and Colorado and Nevada, and if you live in a swing state, I just need you to put forth the solidarity vote, even if you're not happy about it, even if you're not moved by it. Actually, I see Rosa Clemente on there. Girl, I sure did vote for you. Because like in New York back in 2008, Rosa ran, as many folks know, on the Green Party line. And you know what? If the leadership and the values centered in the party are people like Rosa Clemente, who's an amazing Puerto Rican activist who has been on the front lines for a really long time, I'm with it. Do I think Jill Stein represents that? No. So anyway, if you live in New York, and you could vote for whoever you want, but if you live in a swing state, I'm asking you to go to the polls, to vote for Black people, to vote for refugees, to vote for immigrants, to vote for the most marginalized people. Donald Trump has wreaked havoc on our communities. There are Muslim families that are separated from their families because of a Muslim ban. We have babies in cages that may never be reunited with their families on the Mexican border. We got to get this guy out. If you live in New York, listen, write in Bernie Sanders, as my friend Fatma's saying. You could do whatever you want, but if you live in a swing state, you're going to really have to sacrifice for all of us and put in that vote. It may not feel good, but it's going to be the right thing to do. And then after that, I'm committed to building a movement of power that smashes this two-party duopoly, because it's just not working for us.
Yeah, we have like 30 seconds left before IG closes this off. So I just want to say really quickly that I agree very much with Linda's first point that she's making around thinking about the collective nature of voting and how we often think of it just as an individual action, but really we're doing it in collective with other people and movements that we want to build. So I agree 100% with, yeah, we need to be building that third party. As we close off, look, Linda, I just want to say thank you so much again for coming on. Folks, you got to pick up. We're not here to be bystanders. Like, this book is amazing, right? There it is. Everyone pick it up. Barnes and Noble. What's the other place you said that they could pick it up, Linda?
Get it from Barnes and Noble, or you can get it from a place called Bookshop. Bookshop is actually donating money to bookstores to help.
It's gonna close.
Yeah, Bookshop.
Thank you, Linda.